The first thing I remember is the sound, this low, distant hum that didn't belong on the moon. It vibrated through the ground beneath our boots, so faint that at first we thought it was just the echo of our own movements. But when we stopped walking, it didn't stop. It kept going, steady and deliberate, like something alive was breathing somewhere in the darkness below us. That was the moment I realized our simple cave exploration mission was about to turn into something none of us had trained for. I looked at the others, Ethan, Maya, and Louis, and their eyes told me they felt it too, that quiet fear of the unknown that slowly wraps around you when the world you know doesn't match the world you're standing in. It had been only a few hours since we landed the rover near the newly discovered lunar fissure. From orbit, it looked like nothing more than a thin crack stretching across the dusty gray surface. But once we descended closer, the cameras revealed a deep, spiraling cavern leading underground. NASA had suspected caves on the moon for decades, but no one expected a system this massive. For years people talked about lava tubes as future shelters for astronauts, but this structure didn't look like any natural lava tube. Its walls curved too perfectly, its layers too smooth, like something, or someone, had shaped it intentionally long before humans took their first steps on the lunar surface. Ethan was the one who suggested we enter the main opening first. He always liked being the brave one, or at least pretending to be. "We won't get another chance at something like this," he'd said through the comms, voice buzzing with excitement. And he was right. As members of the Lunar Research Group, we had prepared for everything from dust storms to equipment failures, but none of that compared to standing at the mouth of a pitch-black cavern that sank deeper than any of our scanners could measure. It felt like looking into the throat of a sleeping giant. The descent was slow at the beginning. Our boots sank slightly into the fine dust, leaving crisp footprints behind us. The sunlight faded quickly the deeper we went, replaced by the harsh white glow of our helmet lamps. The cave swallowed the light as if it were nothing. Every step echoed off the smooth walls, bouncing back at us in sharp bursts. It was quiet, painfully quiet, except for the hum that kept coming and going like a pulse. I found myself checking my oxygen levels more than necessary, not because anything was wrong but because the silence made me more aware of each breath I took. The temperature dropped as we moved farther inside. Louis, always the analytical mind, commented on it every few minutes, reading off the fluctuations like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "The temperature shouldn't be this stable," he muttered at one point. "We're underground. It should vary with every layer we cross." But it didn't. It stayed almost eerily consistent, just cold enough to raise goosebumps even inside a pressurized suit. Maya walked ahead of me. She was quiet, focused, the kind of person who noticed everything. I saw her stop more than once to press her gloved hand against the wall, studying the texture closely. At first glance the cave walls looked like frozen waves, smooth and layered in a way that almost formed patterns. But on closer inspection those patterns seemed too perfect. They curved around corners in long sweeping arcs, like the lines were guiding us somewhere deeper inside. As we continued walking, my mind kept drifting back to the strange signal that had first alerted NASA to this region. A faint electromagnetic pulse had been picked up by satellites, small, repeating, almost like a heartbeat. Scientists thought it was an error at first. But when the pulses grew stronger, a team was formed, and that's how we ended up here, stepping into the unknown. We stopped for the first time when Maya raised her hand and pointed her light toward a spot on the wall. At first, none of us saw it. But when she adjusted the angle, something caught the light, a thin line carved deeply into the surface. It wasn't natural. It wasn't random. It was a symbol. A shape. A mark that seemed to glow faintly as if responding to our presence. I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise even though I knew there was no air to move it. "What do you think it is?" I asked, squinting to get a better look. Maya shook her head. "I don't know. But it wasn't made by anything geological. This is deliberate work." Louis leaned in closer. "It looks like a direction marker." "Direction to what?" Ethan laughed nervously. But his voice cracked just a little, betraying what he really felt. We pushed on, following the winding tunnel deeper. The hum grew louder the farther we descended, not enough to hurt but enough to make our chests vibrate. It came in waves, matching the faint flickering lights that occasionally danced across the walls like reflections from a distant source. But there was no water on the moon. No liquid. Nothing that could cast reflections. So where was that light coming from? As we rounded a corner, the tunnel suddenly widened into a massive chamber. Our light spread across the open space, revealing a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. The floor was uneven with ridges like frozen ripples of stone. But the thing that caught our attention was the massive structure in the center of the chamber. It stood tall and narrow, shaped like a column carved out of the same material as the cave walls. Only this one was perfectly smooth, smooth enough to reflect the glow from our lamps. Lewis inhaled sharply. That's not natural. There's no way. I felt my heartbeat pick up. Something about its presence felt wrong, like it was waiting for us. Like it had been waiting for a long time. Maya approached the structure slowly. It's warm, she said suddenly. Feel it? Ethan reached out and touched the pillar with the tip of his glove. She's right, he whispered. It's warm. How? Before any of us could guess, the hum shifted into a deeper tone, vibrating through the floor. We stumbled slightly, bracing ourselves. The light that had been flickering along the walls began to gather, pulling toward the column. It swirled around it in thin, ghost-like streams until the entire structure was glowing softly. None of us moved. None of us breathed. I stepped closer, drawn to it even though every instinct told me to stay back. My mind raced through every explanation I knew: natural luminescence, chemical reaction, thermal pockets. But none of them made sense. This wasn't geology. This was design. Intent. It's reacting to us, I said, barely above a whisper. Her voice shaky, Maya replied, or it's waking up. The hum deepened again, and this time the ground trembled. A small crack formed near the base of the column, spreading outward in a thin, jagged line. The air felt different too, thicker, heavier, as if the cave itself was holding its breath. Lewis stumbled backward. We need to document this and get back to the rover. Whatever this is, it's beyond our clearance. We weren't supposed to activate anything. Ethan shook his head. We haven't even touched it. It activated on its own. The glow brightened, washing the chamber in pale white light. That's when we noticed something else: shapes along the far wall, large and indistinct. At first I thought they were shadows. But shadows don't stand still. They don't look carved. They don't resemble figures. Human-like. Tall. Motionless. I blinked hard, trying to focus, but the glow distorted everything. Maya's breath hitched. Those aren't rocks. Ethan stepped forward, raising his lamp higher. Are those statues? Lewis stepped beside him. They looked too detailed for statues. I found myself inching closer even though fear tightened around my throat. The figures were arranged in a line along the wall, 6, maybe 7 of them. Each one stood with arms slightly extended, palms facing outward as if in some kind of greeting or warning. Their features were worn, but not enough to hide the fact that they were modeled after something humanoid. Not necessarily human. Just close. The ground trembled again, harder this time. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber, stretching far beyond anything we could see. We need to move, Lewis said firmly. Now. But Ethan didn't step back. He kept staring at the glowing column, his breath fogging up the inside of his visor. What if this is what sent that signal? What if something is still? A loud crack cut him off. The column split open, a seam running from top to bottom, revealing a blinding light inside. In that instant the hum stopped. Every sound vanished. The silence felt unnatural, like the void before a storm. Then, quietly at first, something moved behind the split column. A shape. A silhouette. Something was standing inside it. Something that hadn't been there a moment before. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan, step back. But it was too late. The light flared so brightly that all of our visors auto-dimmed, plunging us into momentary darkness. The chamber shook violently, the floor cracking beneath our feet. I lost my balance and fell to one knee, dust rising around me in thick clouds. When the light dimmed again, the figures along the wall seemed closer than before, as if they had shifted while we weren't watching. The column pulsed once like a heartbeat. Something exhaled. And for the first time since we entered the cave, the sound wasn't ours. A single low whisper filled the chamber. Not a word, not a language, just a sound that felt like it came from deep within the stone itself. A sound that didn't belong to anything human. We froze, every instinct screaming at us to run, but our legs refused to move. The silhouette behind the glowing seam shifted again, slowly unfolding as though waking from a long and heavy sleep. Then, just before we could see its shape clearly, the lights in our helmets flickered violently, and the chamber plunged into total darkness. We heard one thing before the darkness swallowed us completely. Step. Not ours. Something was hiding down here. And now, it wasn't hiding anymore. For a few seconds, none of us could even breathe. The darkness inside the lunar chamber pressed against us like a physical weight, settling over our shoulders and wrapping around our helmets. I tried tapping my helmet light, hoping it was just a power glitch, but nothing happened. My visor showed only static for a moment before clearing enough to reveal pitch-black surroundings. I could still hear my own breathing, fast and uneven, echoing inside the suit. That was the only proof that time hadn't completely stopped. Somewhere to my left, Maya whispered, "Everyone stay still." Her voice was tight, almost trembling, but she was trying to keep us grounded. "Don't move until we know what caused the power drop." Ethan didn't listen. "It stepped," he whispered back, voice cracking. I heard it. Something stepped. It was right in front of us. Lewis exhaled sharply. We all heard something. But sound travels strangely down here. The walls could be bouncing it from anywhere. I wanted to believe him, but the memory of that slow, heavy step was too clear. It hadn't sounded like an echo. It had weight, purpose. Something had been moving inside that glowing column, and whatever it was no longer contained. I blinked until my eyes adjusted slightly to the faint natural light filtering through the dust. I could see shapes, barely, outlines of the others shifting as they tried to orient themselves. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tried not to imagine another outline standing among us. Lewis tapped at his wrist console, muttering to himself as he checked readings. "Systems are glitching. All our power drains spiked at the exact same second. That shouldn't happen unless something interfered," Maya finished for him. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Something external." A faint pulse rolled through the ground again, not violent like before but steady, like a slow heartbeat that belonged to the cave itself. I felt it travel from my boots to my spine. The hum that had filled the chamber earlier didn't return, but the silence felt sharper, heavier, as if we had stepped into a deeper layer of the unknown. Finally, after a tense minute, my suit light flickered weakly, glowing with a dim, unsteady beam. The others' lights gradually came back too, but none of them were as bright as before. It was enough to see the outlines of the chamber again, the towering ceiling, the cracked floor, the faint dust drifting through the air. But the pale glowing column in the center looked different now. Dimmer. As if whatever energy it held had been drained or taken. Worse, the seam that had split down the center was still open. Ethan raised his weakened light toward it very slowly. Do you see anything inside?" Maya stepped closer, squinting. Her voice came through the comms, thin and uneasy. "It's empty." I didn't want to accept that. My eyes scanned the crack anyway, hoping she was wrong, hoping to find something other than empty darkness. But she was right. The space inside the column was hollow now, a void where something had been standing only moments earlier. Lewis swallowed hard. Whatever was inside, it's out now. None of us responded. There wasn't anything to say. A thin layer of dust on the ground near the column had been disturbed, forming small depressions, too vague to be called footprints but not random either. As if something had brushed past it. Ethan took an uneasy step back. Maybe it moved deeper into the cave system. But why? Maya asked. Why now? Why when we arrived? Maybe we triggered something, Lewis said. Maybe our presence woke it. The word woke stirred something cold inside me. If this was a dormant system, an ancient one, then our mere arrival might have activated processes that hadn't run for thousands of years. Whatever intelligence built this place could have been waiting for a signal, a presence, anything to reawaken it. My suit sensors pinged suddenly, a faint signal, something electromagnetic bouncing through the chamber. The same pattern NASA had detected from orbit. But this time it felt closer. More deliberate. The pulse repeated, stronger. Maya noticed it too. It's still here, she whispered. Somewhere nearby. The four of us instinctively moved closer together. Our lights caught the long row of humanoid statues along the far wall. They looked more detailed now that the dust had settled, stone-like figures with elongated arms and narrow torsos, each one facing the center of the chamber. Their expressions were smooth and unreadable, but something about their posture felt expectant. Ethan stared at them uneasily. They weren't this close before. Lewis gave him a tense look. We might have misjudged the distance. Our lights were flickering. The dust. No, Ethan said firmly. They're closer. His voice trembled slightly. I'm sure of it. I didn't want to admit it, but he might have been right. The statues seemed inches nearer, enough to make my skin crawl beneath the suit. But statues don't move. They can't. Unless they weren't statues at all. A soft echoing sound drifted from a tunnel opposite the chamber, a long, deep resonance that faded slowly. It was like a call, but nothing like an animal or mechanism. It was something in between, something foreign. Something that didn't belong on the moon. Maya turned toward it instantly. That came from the North Passage. That's where the mapping drone lost signal earlier, Lewis added, his tone suddenly thoughtful. Right before we came down. Ethan shot him a look. You didn't think to mention that earlier? I thought it was a malfunction, Lewis said. This place interferes with everything. Well, something in there isn't malfunctioning. Ethan pointed toward the dark passage ahead, his voice low. Something's alive in these caves. We didn't move for a long moment. We just listened. The echo faded into nothing, replaced again by the thick silence that wrapped the chamber. I finally spoke. We need to decide whether we follow it or head back. Maya took a careful breath. Going back isn't safe either. The cave shifted when the column opened. The crack near the entrance might have widened. We don't know if our exit is stable. Lewis checked his readings again. The seismic activity is increasing in cycles. Whatever energy was released might be affecting the entire cave structure. If these passages collapse, we could be trapped down here indefinitely. Ethan clenched his jaw. So our choices are follow the creepy noise into a darker part of the cave, or hope the entrance hasn't caved in. Pretty much, Lewis replied. Great. We moved together toward the north passage, our lights barely cutting through the thick layers of dust. The tunnel ahead sloped downward, its walls marked by the same strange patterns as before, curved lines, smooth ridges, almost like writing. Maya ran her glove along one of the indentations. These markings go deeper than surface carving, she murmured. Look at the layering. This material wasn't carved. It was shaped. Shaped by what? Ethan asked. She shook her head. I don't know. But it wasn't any natural force. As we descended farther, the air, or whatever equivalent existed inside our suits, felt heavier. The pulse we'd felt earlier grew slightly stronger as though we were approaching the source. The cave walls reflected our lights in faint shimmering waves, like they were reacting to the energy disturbance too. Lewis spoke softly, almost to himself. This entire place, it feels engineered. Like a facility. Or a shelter. A shelter for what? Ethan whispered. That's what worries me, Lewis said. We continued down the tunnel until it opened into a smaller chamber. The ceiling here was lower, the walls curved inward like a dome. In the center was a raised platform made of the same smooth material as the column above. But this structure was smaller, almost like a table or console. Faint symbols glowed along its edges, flickering in unpredictable patterns. Maya stepped closer. It's active. Is that a good thing? Ethan asked. I'm not sure, she replied. But it means this place isn't abandoned. Lewis scanned the platform with a handheld sensor. It's emitting the same frequency as the signal we detected from orbit. Only stronger. More controlled. As he spoke, the platform pulsed once, a bright flash that lit up the chamber for a split second. The ground beneath us vibrated softly. Ethan stumbled back. Okay, it knows we're here. That's enough for me. Before anyone could respond, a new sound filled the chamber. Not a hum, not an echo. This was softer, almost cautious, like something brushing against stone somewhere behind us. We turned slowly. At the far end of the chamber, a shape stood just beyond the reach of our lights. A tall silhouette, barely visible through the drifting dust. It wasn't moving. It wasn't speaking. It was just watching. My voice came out a whisper. Do you see it? Maya nodded slowly. Yes. Lewis froze, breath shallow. It's the same height as the statues. But it's not a statue, Ethan said, stepping back as the silhouette shifted slightly, tilting its head as though studying us. It took one quiet step forward. Only one. But that was enough to make every muscle in my body lock in place. Our lights dimmed again for a split second, flickering as if something was draining their power with each movement the figure made. The platform behind us pulsed again as if responding to its presence. The silhouette stood there, unmoving now, just watching us from the edge of darkness. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. But its stillness was worse. It felt like it was waiting for something. Or deciding something. Maya spoke very quietly. Everyone, do not make any sudden movements. Ethan whispered back, what is it? Lewis swallowed hard. I don't know. I could barely breathe. The figure took another slow step, its outline becoming slightly clearer, just enough to see the suggestion of limbs, a narrow frame, and a faint glow around its chest like an internal light. Then, without warning, all the lights in our suits flickered violently. The chamber plunged into darkness once more. A sound rose slowly from the shadows. Not a step this time. A breath. Soft, deliberate, impossibly close. We weren't alone in the moon's caves. And whatever had woken up was standing right in front of us. For a moment, it felt like the entire moon held its breath with us. The darkness wasn't just around us. It felt like it was inside our helmets, pressing into our minds, making us imagine shapes and movements that might not even be real. I kept my eyes open even though I couldn't see anything because closing them felt worse. My heartbeat thudded loudly in my ears, and I wondered if the others could hear it through the comms. Then, somewhere in front of us, something shifted. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a soft rustle, like dust sliding across stone. Maya spoke first, her voice barely controlled. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." Ethan's breath shook. "It's too close. I can feel it." Lewis responded, whispering so quietly his words cracked. "That might just be the echo. Don't assume." A faint glow blinked into existence. At first I thought it was another power surge, but this light wasn't from our suits. It came from above, a dim white shimmer drifting down like mist. Our visors adjusted, making the outlines of the chamber return slowly, inch by inch. I saw the silhouette again. It was still there, still standing in the same spot as before, but now it looked more solid. Its form was slender, taller than any of us, with limbs slightly longer than human proportions. A soft bluish glow pulsed in its chest, steady, rhythmic, like a slow heartbeat. It didn't move, but it wasn't frozen either. It felt aware. Observing. Studying us the way we studied strange life in a lab. None of us dared to speak. Lewis, trembling, checked his readings again. "It's emitting a low-frequency field. It's not attacking, just scanning." Ethan whispered, "Scanning us for what?" "I don't know," Lewis muttered. "Composition? Movement? Temperature? It's gathering data." Maya kept her light low, careful not to point it directly at the figure. "If it's intelligent, we shouldn't behave like a threat." "Then someone tell my brain that," Ethan said shakily. The figure tilted its head slightly when Ethan spoke, almost like it recognized the change in tone. Its chest glow brightened for a heartbeat, then dimmed again. I swallowed the knot forming in my throat. "Maybe it's trying to understand us." Lewis nodded faintly. "It woke up when we arrived. Maybe it hasn't seen anything alive in a long time." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Assuming it recognizes us as alive." None of us had an answer to that. The figure took a single step forward. Slow. Deliberate. The faint pulse from its chest matched the shift of its weight like its whole body ran on that internal rhythm. The dust beneath its feet barely moved. It didn't make a sound. Ethan took a step back instinctively. "Nope. Nope. It's coming closer." "Don't move," Maya said quickly, grabbing Ethan's arm. "If it wanted to hurt us, it would have done it already. But just trust me." The figure paused at her voice. Its head turned toward Maya, and for the first time I sensed some kind of reaction. Not emotion exactly. More like recognition. Curiosity. As if Maya had spoken a word it somehow understood without understanding the language. Lewis stared at his readings. The electromagnetic interference. It's synchronizing with our suit frequencies. Almost like it's matching them. "Why?" I asked. "So it can communicate," he said slowly. But the figure didn't speak. It didn't make a sound at all. Instead, another pulse moved through the ground, gentle, like a wave of energy radiating outward from its body. The platform behind us flickered again, responding instantly to the pulse. The symbols along its edges brightened in an organized pattern, almost like a response code. Ethan's voice shook. "Guys, it's interacting with the structure." Maya turned slightly. "Maybe it's not alone. Maybe this whole cave system is connected to it." "That raises bigger questions," Lewis muttered. "Who built this? And why leave something like that inside it?" The figure straightened, its head turning slowly toward the far wall. A soft rumble filled the chamber, and for a second I thought the cave was collapsing. But the ground didn't shake. Instead, the row of humanoid statues along the wall lit up faintly, pale white lines tracing their outlines. They remained motionless, but something had changed. The air felt tighter, charged, as if another layer of the cave's history had just awakened. Ethan stared at them. "Tell me those things are still statues." But the figure ignored the statues completely. Instead, it raised one arm, smooth and almost graceful, and pointed deeper into the tunnel behind it. A long, dark passage stretched away into the depths of the moon, disappearing into darkness thicker than the cave around us. That passage wasn't mapped. It wasn't on any of our scans. Lewis's voice cracked. "Is it telling us to go there?" Maya frowned. "Or telling us not to?" We stared into the darkness, unable to tell which it meant. The figure didn't move again. It just kept its arm raised, pointing as if waiting on us to make a choice. My stomach tightened. "Why that direction? There's nothing on our scans." Lewis shook his head. "There wasn't supposed to be a glowing column either." Ethan swallowed hard. "What if this is some kind of test? Or a warning?" Before we could debate further, a new sound drifted up from the tunnel the figure pointed toward. A soft, rhythmic vibration that wasn't mechanical. It was too natural, like breathing. Slow. Coming from somewhere farther down. Maya tensed. There's something else in that passage. Lewis adjusted his scanner. I'm detecting heat signatures. Ethan turned sharply toward him. Something else alive? It's not clear, Lewis said. It's not human. Or anything Earth-based. The tension rose again, fear mixing with curiosity in a way that made it hard to think straight. We were scientists, explorers, trained to run toward the unknown. But this wasn't like anything we had studied or imagined. The moon had always been silent, empty, predictable. But here, beneath the surface, inside these ancient caves, that belief was breaking apart piece by piece. The figure finally lowered its arm. Its chest pulse dimmed slightly, and it stepped backward, retreating just a little into the edge of darkness. Almost like it was giving us space. Or giving us a choice. Why does it feel like it's waiting for us? I whispered. Maybe we triggered something bigger, Lewis said quietly. A system. A sequence. Ethan looked at each of us. So what do we do? Follow the thing it pointed at? Or head back before the entire cave wakes up? There was no easy answer. Maya turned toward the dark passage again, her voice calm but unsure. If there's more down there, maybe it explains everything. The symbols, the statues, the signals from orbit. This whole place might be connected to something deeper. But deeper means more dangerous, Ethan muttered. Lewis sighed. Going back could be worse. The seismic readings are unstable. If the entrance shifted again, we might not get out. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of the decision. Ahead of us was darkness and the possibility of more unknown creatures. Or a discovery beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Behind us was the way out, but the way out might already be closing. The figure's chest glowed again, brighter for a moment, as if urging us forward. Maya stepped a little closer to the passage. Whatever is down there. I think it's connected to why this place was built. Lewis nodded slowly. And what woke up? Ethan stood still, breathing heavily. I hate this. But he didn't step back. None of us did. Because the longer we stared into the dark passage, the more something strange began to surface in all of us. Curiosity. A pull. A sense that the answers wouldn't come unless we walked deeper into the cave system. The figure didn't move. It didn't threaten. It simply waited. But the rumbling, the soft breathing-like sound from deeper inside, that grew louder. Whatever was hiding in those deeper tunnels was awake now too. And it wasn't staying silent anymore. The air inside the chamber grew heavier as they stepped deeper into the narrow passage, the distant hum of the ancient machine echoing like a pulse through the stone walls. Adil felt it vibrating in his ribs, almost as if the whole structure was breathing in slow, uneven waves. Sanaa walked ahead with her flashlight raised, its beam cutting through the dust-filled air. Hamza followed close behind, whispering that the readings on his scanner were climbing fast, much faster than before. None of them said what they were all thinking, that whatever lay ahead was waking up. Adil's eyes kept drifting back to the carvings on the walls, noticing shapes that hadn't been visible earlier. Some looked like stars, others like spirals pressed deep into the rock, each one glowing faintly as if reacting to their presence. Sanaa slowed down, tracing her fingers over one of the symbols, and for a split second the light under her touch brightened. She pulled her hand back immediately, her breath catching in her throat. Hamza muttered that the energy signature had just spiked again, nearly doubling. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was responding. Their footsteps echoed louder as they entered the wide chamber, the heart of the structure. The massive core stood at the center, suspended above the ground by thick, metallic beams. The sphere inside it spun slowly, emitting a soft blue glow that pulsed in perfect rhythm with the humming around them. Adil felt the hair on his arms stand up. Something had changed since the last time they were here. The glow was brighter now, sharper, almost alert. Sanaa scanned the room, her eyes narrowing. She pointed toward the far side where a large panel, once dead, was now lit with shifting patterns. It looked like a control system, but the symbols on it kept rearranging themselves too quickly to understand. Hamza approached it carefully, trying to study the pattern, but the moment he got close, the symbols froze. The panel flickered once and began forming a new sequence. Adil took a step back, unsure if they had triggered something or if the machine had simply decided to reveal the next step. The hum grew deeper, vibrating through the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling in soft streams. The sphere's rotation increased slightly, the blue glow turning a cold white for a moment before settling back. Sanaa whispered that the machine was preparing for something. She didn't know what, but they could all feel the shift. The temperature dropped. The air thinned. Every instinct screamed to run, but curiosity kept them rooted. Adil moved closer to the core, trying to understand the pattern of its movement. He noticed faint shadows swirling inside the sphere, shifting like distant storms. When he leaned in, the sphere responded with a bright pulse of light that forced him to step back. Hamza grabbed his arm, asking if he was okay. Adil nodded, but the pulse had left a ringing in his ears, like the machine was trying to speak in a language just beyond human understanding. Sanaa's voice trembled slightly as she said the machine wasn't just waking, it was choosing. The thought sent a chill through Adil. Choosing what? Or who? A sudden crack echoed through the chamber as one of the metallic beams holding the core shook violently. The entire structure groaned. Hamza checked his scanner again, and the numbers were now off the scale. The device wasn't built to measure whatever was happening. The lights in the chamber flickered, shadows jumping across the walls like moving silhouettes. Adil stepped backward, his chest tightening. The core glowed with an intensity that made it hard to look at directly. Sanaa shielded her eyes, urging them to stay alert. The humming transformed into a rising tone, steady and sharp, like something was charging deep inside the machine. It felt like the entire place was building up to a single moment, one that none of them could predict or stop. Adil could feel it in his bones, a pressure that stretched the limits of the room, as if reality itself was being pulled toward the sphere. He exchanged a quick glance with Sanaa and Hamza. Their expressions held the same mix of fear and awe. And then, without warning, the light inside the core flared again, brighter than ever before. The ground trembled. The symbols on the far panel locked into place, forming a pattern none of them recognized. The air hummed with energy so dense it felt like a physical force pressing against their skin. Adil took a slow breath, knowing they were seconds away from something big, something that could change everything. The machine had reached its peak, and whatever came next would decide the fate of everything they had worked for. They stood frozen, eyes locked on the core, as the chamber braced itself for the moment they had unknowingly been moving toward from the very beginning. The blinding light inside the core didn't fade, it shifted. Instead of bursting outward, it tightened itself into a thin vertical beam that stretched from the sphere straight up into the darkness above. The chamber vibrated so violently that Adil had to grip a nearby column to stay balanced. Sanaa covered her ears as a deep, echoing pulse rolled through the room like a shockwave. Hamza stumbled backward, staring at the beam with wide, terrified eyes. Something new had awakened, something none of them had expected. The ground rumbled again, but this time the noise didn't come from the machine. It came from the walls themselves. The carvings that had been glowing faintly before now began shifting, sliding into new patterns as if the stone was alive. Adil watched in disbelief as ancient symbols rearranged themselves across the smooth surface, forming what looked like a massive map. Lines connected star-like shapes, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Sanaa whispered that the structure wasn't only a machine, it was a navigation system. But for what? And why was it changing now? Before they could process it, the panel on the far wall flickered violently, then projected a hologram of swirling points of light, like a star field, but distorted, unstable. Hamza stepped forward, his voice trembling as he said the pattern matched nothing recorded in any astronomical database. It wasn't a map of the sky they knew. It was a map of somewhere else. Somewhere unreachable. Adil felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The machine wasn't preparing for activation. It was preparing for arrival. Sanaa grabbed his hand, her voice barely a whisper as she said the energy readings weren't rising. They were aligning. The machine wasn't gathering power. It was syncing with something outside the chamber, something far beyond their understanding. Adil glanced again at the swirling shapes inside the spinning core, noticing that the shadows no longer moved randomly. They were forming patterns, shapes that grew clearer with every rotation. It looked almost like figures. Then the second shockwave hit. The chamber lights cut out completely, plunging them into darkness except for the burning white beam piercing upward from the sphere. Adil heard a low cracking sound overhead, and when he lifted his flashlight, he saw thin lines forming across the ceiling, glowing the same color as the beam. The cracks weren't signs of damage. They were opening deliberately, like a door slowly unlocking. Hamza shouted that the machine was linking to something above them, maybe deep beneath the surface or even beyond the planet itself. Sanaa's breathing turned shaky. She said something else had triggered the activation, something not connected to them. Adil knew immediately what she meant. They weren't the catalyst. They were just witnesses. The ground quaked so hard that dust rained down in thick clouds. The beam grew stronger, vibrating with a strange rhythm that felt too intentional to be random. The cracks in the ceiling widened, revealing a faint glow from the other side, soft, golden, and shifting like liquid light. Adil stepped backward, instinct taking over. Whatever was coming through that opening wasn't part of the machine. This was something separate, something the machine had been waiting centuries to contact. Sanaa tightly gripped his arm, her voice barely steady as she said that the symbols on the wall now matched ancient scripts found in ruins across different continents. Scripts no civilization should have been able to share. That meant this machine wasn't tied to one lost culture. It was connected to all of them. A cold realization washed over Adil. This wasn't just an ancient relic. It was a beacon. Hamza checked his scanner again, but the device flickered and died in his hands. The electromagnetic field inside the chamber was now too strong for anything human-made to function. The air felt metallic, charged with a static energy that prickled against their skin. Adil's heart pounded harder with each passing second. And then, just as the golden light above began to spill downward, the sphere inside the core abruptly stopped spinning. Not slowed. Not powered down. Stopped. Instantly. Completely. The beams snapped off, plunging them into near darkness again. The only light came from the glowing cracks above, casting thin lines across the chamber like a web. The sudden silence was terrifying. Sanaa whispered Adil's name, but before he could answer, the sphere emitted a soft vibration, gentle at first, then rising into a low hum that grew sharper and sharper. Adil realized this wasn't the same pulse as before. This was a signal. The machine was calling out. But the worst part wasn't the signal, it was the answer. A distant echo, faint but unmistakable, responded from somewhere far above them. A sound that didn't belong to any natural phenomenon they had ever studied. A sound that felt impossibly old yet unnervingly aware. Adil's stomach twisted as the realization sank in. The machine hadn't reached its climax. It had just made contact. And whatever answered, was getting closer. The answering sound grew louder, no longer a distant echo but a rising vibration that made the air tighten around them. Adil felt it first in his chest, like an extra heartbeat that wasn't his own. Sanaa grabbed his wrist, her eyes wide but steady, trying to anchor herself in the moment. Hamza stepped back toward the wall, his breath sharp and uneven, as though the oxygen in the chamber had suddenly thinned. The glowing cracks in the ceiling widened all at once with a soft rippling shudder, almost like fabric being pulled apart. The golden light above spilled down in thick waves, illuminating the chamber in a calm, warm glow that didn't match the fear tightening inside them. And then something descended through the opening, a shape not entirely solid, like a silhouette caught between matter and light. It moved slowly, not with aggression, but with a curious patience, as though it had been waiting a long time for this moment. Adil raised his hand slightly, unsure if he was meant to speak or stand perfectly still. The shape drifted lower until it hovered a few meters above the sphere, its form shifting in soft waves. For a moment, the glowing patterns on the chamber walls synchronized with its movements, creating a harmony of light that filled the space. Sanaa breathed out shakily, whispering that the machine wasn't a weapon or a warning, it was a guide. A bridge. The sphere at the center of the room began to rotate again, but this time the motion was slow and smooth, almost like a heartbeat syncing with the presence above it. The core filled with swirling light instead of shadows, forming images that flickered just long enough to understand. Ancient cities, unfamiliar skies, maps stretching across stars they didn't recognize. Hamza watched in awe as it revealed glimpses of a civilization that once walked this world long before any recorded history. Adil felt a strange ache in his chest as he realized they were seeing memories, echoes of a lost species that left behind their knowledge hidden deep underground. The shifting figure lowered further, stopping just above the sphere. Its shape sharpened slightly, still not fully solid but distinct enough for Adil to make out the outline of a face, calm, almost human. A soft wave of warmth rippled through the chamber, and the figure extended a faint, glowing hand towards Sanaa. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out slowly as though pulled by instinct. When her fingers passed through the light, it didn't burn or shock. Instead, it felt like a breeze carrying meaning instead of sound. Adil watched her expression soften as her eyes filled with understanding. The figure wasn't here to threaten them. It was communicating, without words, without force, simply showing them what had been hidden and why. Sanaa whispered that the ancient builders weren't conquerors or invaders. They were explorers, searching for safe places across the solar system as their own world began to die. This underground structure wasn't meant to bring something here, it was meant to open a path for those who came after. A final gift. A warning. A hope. But just as the tension eased, the sphere emitted a sharp pulse, the first violent sound they'd heard since the machine changed. The figure flickered, its shape wavered, and the trembling walls suggested something had shifted outside the chamber. Hamza looked at his dead scanner instinctively, though it wasn't working. He didn't need it to know something was wrong. Adil saw the sphere's rotations begin to speed up again, far faster than before. The warm light darkened into a deep amber, and the carvings on the walls shifted into patterns they hadn't seen earlier. The chamber wasn't stabilizing. It was overloading. The machine had completed its purpose, but it wasn't meant to stay active this long. Sanaa warned that they needed to leave now, or the entire structure could collapse under the strain. Adil grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the tunnel entrance, shouting for Hamza to follow. The glowing figure above the sphere flickered harder, its outline breaking apart in streams of light as the ceiling cracks pulsed violently. It wasn't attacking them, it was urging them to escape. The floor split in a narrow fracture that raced across the room, glowing like molten stone beneath their feet. Dust rained down as the walls shook, old stone struggling against a machine meant to shut down centuries ago. Adil pushed Sanaa through the tunnel first, then helped Hamza as the chamber behind them roared with deep, grinding vibrations. The moment Adil stepped into the passage, a blast of warm wind shot past, and the golden light inside the chamber exploded outward in a final burst. They ran without looking back, the tunnel walls vibrating so hard that chunks of rock tumbled around them. Hamza slid once, caught himself and kept going. Sanaa kept glancing over her shoulder, fear tightening her breathing, but Adil pushed her onward. The entire underground complex shook like it was taking its last breath. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled out into the main entrance chamber where their equipment lay scattered. Adil felt the tremors ease slightly, then grow quiet. Completely quiet. A silence so sudden it made him freeze. Sanaa slowly turned toward the tunnel behind them. A faint glow flickered inside, the last heartbeat of the machine fading into darkness. The entire underground system settled, dust drifting lazily in the beam of their flashlights. It was over. Or so they thought. Just as Adil exhaled in relief, the ground beneath them emitted one final gentle pulse. Not violent. Not dangerous. Almost like a farewell. Or a message. Adil felt it in his shoes, then up his spine, a soft rhythmic echo that didn't scare him this time. But when he lifted his eyes toward the far wall, he noticed something he had never seen before. One of the carvings, previously dull and ignored, was now glowing faintly. A symbol shaped like a star split into 3 branches. And beneath it, a line of smaller markings had appeared, clear and unmistakable. They weren't part of the old system. They were new. Hamza stared at them, confused. Sanaa stepped closer, her voice cracking as she whispered that the markings formed a date. A future date. A day none of them would ever forget now. Adil felt the last twist hit him with a cold rush. The machine hadn't collapsed. It had set a timer. And whatever story they thought had ended deep beneath the surface, had only just begun. Adil stood frozen, staring at the strange markings etched into the rock, the glow from the symbol reflecting faintly in his visor. The pulse they felt beneath their feet seemed to linger, like the chamber itself was leaving a final message for them. Sanaa and Hamza moved closer, both equally mesmerized, their breaths slow and deliberate. No one spoke for a few moments. None of them wanted to break the fragile connection that had been left behind. The machine had done more than awaken. It had communicated, shared a glimpse of a lost civilization, and left them with a legacy they could barely comprehend. Sanaa finally broke the silence, her voice quiet but steady. It's a warning. Or maybe a guide. The date, it's a signal. The builders didn't just vanish, they set this up for whoever came next. Her fingers traced the glowing lines, careful not to disturb them. They wanted us to see it. To remember. To prepare. Adil nodded slowly, trying to process everything. But why now? Why did it activate when we arrived? He glanced at Hamza, whose expression mirrored the mixture of fear and awe Adil felt. Was it expecting humans? Or did we just stumble into something bigger than ourselves? Hamza shrugged, still scanning the markings with his handheld device. Maybe both. Maybe the system was waiting for a certain set of conditions. Or maybe it always wakes when curiosity reaches a threshold. Whatever triggered it, we've learned more in these last few hours than any mission on the moon's surface could ever teach us. They lingered for a moment longer, taking in the calm after the storm. The main chamber, once alive with glowing energy and vibrating with the heartbeat of an ancient civilization, now lay silent. The sphere's last light had faded entirely, and the cracks in the ceiling sealed themselves with an almost imperceptible click. The moon felt still again, quiet and ancient, but somehow different. Adil realized it wasn't emptiness they were seeing now. It was potential. The moon had secrets, but some of them were meant to guide humanity, not destroy it. As they began to make their way back to the surface, the tension in their bodies slowly relaxed. Each step carried a sense of weight lifted, but the knowledge of what they had discovered stayed heavy in their minds. They moved silently, the glow from their flashlights dancing across walls lined with symbols that no one would ever fully decode, but each of them carried pieces of the puzzle now. Pieces that might change human history. Outside, the lunar surface stretched endlessly under the black sky. Earth hung in the distance, bright and vibrant, seemingly untouched by the discoveries they had made. Adil took a deep breath through his helmet, feeling the weight of the mission lift just slightly. Sanaa and Hamza followed, their helmets reflecting the earthlight. The moon had seemed empty when they arrived, but now it had a voice, a memory and a warning. And they were the first to hear it in centuries. Sanaa finally broke the silence. We'll need to report this. Carefully. Nobody will believe everything we saw. They'll think we're exaggerating, or worse, lying. She shook her head, her voice soft but resolute. But the evidence is here. And it will change how we understand life, exploration, even our place in the universe. Adil nodded. We can't just treat it like another mission log. We have to study it properly, protect it, and prepare. That date, it's important. Whatever it signifies, it's not random. They left it for a reason. And that reason might not be something we can control. Hamza looked up at the moon's horizon, his expression thoughtful. The machine, it didn't just reveal a lost civilization. It showed us how they thought. How they solved problems, how they adapted. That's the lesson. They left their knowledge as a guide. And maybe a warning about what happens if we ignore it. The three of them climbed into their lunar rover, the vehicle's systems humming softly as they prepared to leave the cave's vicinity. As the rover moved, Adil stole one last glance at the opening to the tunnels. The faint glow from the symbols remained, dim but steady, like a heartbeat echoing under the moon's surface. It was a reminder that this wasn't the end. The journey in many ways had just begun. As they drove toward the command module orbiting above, they talked quietly about what they had experienced. They debated the possibilities, speculated on what the ancient builders were trying to convey, and shared the quiet awe that had taken root in each of them. There was a sense of unity now, forged in the crucible of fear, curiosity, and discovery. They weren't just explorers. They were witnesses, and potentially custodians of knowledge that could redefine humanity's understanding of the moon and beyond. The climb back to the surface marked a turning point. The barren lunar plains, once intimidating in their emptiness, now seemed alive with possibility. Every crater, every ridge, every shadow could hold another secret waiting to be uncovered. They realized the moon was not just a desolate rock. It was a library, an archive, and a cautionary tale wrapped into one, patiently waiting for those willing to seek its hidden stories. When they finally reached the edge of the cliff overlooking the horizon, Earth rising above the dark expanse, Adil couldn't help but reflect. We came looking for caves, for rocks, for history. But we found something else. Something alive in memory, in energy, in purpose. It's more than we imagined. Sanaa nodded, looking at the date etched in her mind from the symbols. And it's still waiting for us. Not just a relic, not just a lesson. Something that will continue. We'll have to be ready. Hamza added quietly, we might not even be the first humans to understand, but we're the first to experience it fully. That gives us a responsibility. The moon isn't empty. It never was. It's always been watching. They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of their discovery settling around them like the faint lunar dust kicked up by the rover. Their mission had begun as exploration, but it ended as revelation. The moon had spoken and they had listened. They had uncovered the conflict, faced the unknown, and emerged with knowledge that would echo far beyond the silent plains of the lunar surface. As the rover's engines hummed and carried them back toward their module, the symbols on the moon's surface glimmered faintly in their memories. The story of the ancient builders, the machine, and the mysterious date would stay with them forever. And though the immediate danger was over, the sense of anticipation, the pull toward the future the builders had hinted at, remained. Adil realized that their journey was not just about survival, discovery, or exploration. It was about connection. Connection to something ancient, intelligent, and patient. Something that had waited millennia for the right humans to arrive. And in that moment, as Earth's blue curve filled their visors, they knew the moon had more secrets yet to reveal. They didn't have all the answers, but they had begun a story that could change everything. The rover lifted off from the lunar surface, carrying Adil, Sanaa, and Hamza back to orbit, and the vast expanse of the moon stretched behind them, quiet yet alive. The caves had held their mysteries, and the machine had shared its knowledge. The lessons of the past, the warnings, and the glimpses of a future unknown now traveled with them. Adil leaned back, looking out at the black sky and distant stars, feeling both small and significant at once. They had survived the awakening, witnessed the climax, and carried the story forward. And though questions lingered, the moon had given them hope, purpose, and a challenge. The legacy of the builders was theirs to honor, and they would return, prepared for whatever lay ahead. For now, they had seen enough to understand that humanity's story was just one chapter. The moon had told them its tale, but it was only the beginning. The final twist, the message, and the date would continue to guide them, and the rest of the world, toward what came next. The horizon of Earth grew larger in their visors, reflecting the promise of return, of study, and of vigilance. And deep inside each of them knew, the caves on the moon held more than rocks and shadows. They held the memory of a civilization, the pulse of a machine, and a message waiting to shape the future. The unknown was no longer silent. And neither were they.